What's up, Comic-Con? Make some noise! Okay, now hold on, Chad.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Hold on one second.
I'm just ready to give you a compliment.
Oh.
You look incredible, sir.
Well, I wanted something subtle. Thank you. As this is a panel talking about cosplay, and of course the cosplay documentary, I thought it felt very apropos to show up in something simple. Thank you all for being here. We're extremely excited to take this as an opportunity to do some deep diving into cosplay. I'm going to start with Barry. Being costume, makeup, and hair designers, I imagine that your passion for this as a profession as well as an art form started fairly early on. Was there a particular character or project from your past that basically got that spark going and got the ball rolling on you being a part of this?
That's a hard question because I was always interested in the design process of all the films and movies I watched as a kid, but old Hollywood films from back in the day were always something that was such a huge influence to me, and that's why I'm always drawn to period work, I think, in my career now. But what really kind of got my brain going that this was actually a job and people were doing this was when Ryan Murphy kind of hit the scene and started creating these crazy TV shows that built these worlds around characters that were very real but also just completely out of the box and forced you to dream that. And it made me realize there were people actually doing this for a living and creating these characters. And then getting to work with him years later was, kind of the full circle moment. So early on, his stuff really inspired me to kind of dream about design.
Megan, I'm going to jump to you. We have to talk about Moon Knight. I know. Also, hello, panelists. I didn't get to meet you all earlier. I'm Chris. It's nice to meet you. So it's only obviously the first day of Comic-Con, and I've already seen a few Moon Knight cosplayers. I see some over here. Can you share with us your approach on combining comic book accurate looks along with unique flares and tweaks to create the amazing Emmy-nominated costumes we see in the show?
Thank you. It's very important for the fans especially to have the costumes be comic book accurate, but then bring them to the next level. So I wanted to make sure to do that with 3D printing, design lines, the color. In the comic, Moon Knight is white. And he says, I wear white so you can see me coming. And for our show, I didn't want it just to be the flash of white, so we put the additional texture of the gray. So it was about incorporating new technologies, how to update to what we're doing now, and it's just really exciting because between the 3D printing and the molding and the sculpting, and then for our Mr. Knight fan over here, we did the bespoke suiting in-house. So we filmed in Budapest, and so the fabric, which the suit is made out of, is actually upholstery fabric, because I needed it to wear and tear, and I knew we would be filming outside on cobblestone streets, so we had 47 of those suits.
Wow, glorious.
Yeah, so, and there was 2 stunt guys, so everyone had a good amount. So it was about incorporating not only the 3D printing, but how can we use the resources of different fabrics that that can take the wear and tear. So I like to use a lot of unconventional items in the costume design for any job that I do, so it was about incorporating all of that.
Wow. So my script has actually a second question for you, which you kind of touched on, but if you want to delve more into, please feel free. Considering the show is very action-packed, what was your design process like in terms of finding fabric that the actors can move in and can still do the crazy stunts?
It was very, very important to me that Oscar could do the moves and his stunt people could do the moves, and then also the other stunt people when they were doing the action. So the Moonette costume is made out of, it's called Euro Jersey. It's a Euro stretch. That's a 4-way stretch that is then 3D printed with different layers of 3D print. And the 3D print doesn't actually crack with the wear and tear. So that was very, very important. But we did this in the time of COVID. So the costume, the Mr. Knight costume was constructed in Budapest, but the Moon Knight costume was made or pieced together by FBFX, which is a costume house in the UK. And we were in lockdown, and the UK was in lockdown, so we couldn't actually send Oscar to the UK because he would have had to quarantine for 14 days. So I sent the stunt guys. So they quarantined for 14 days, and they worked out all the kinks and the twists, and I was on FaceTime being like, okay, now, whatever move you're gonna do the move in the costume, and if the pants aren't fitting or something's not fitting, we need to correct it now. So by the time it came to Budapest, it came out of the box. Oscar put it on, and the next day we went to camera.
Wow.
So he only had it on. We worked out everything else by the grace of Zoom.
Thank you, Zoom, if you are watching.
So fantasy and sci-fi tend to be kith and kin with each other. So I want to single out Bernadette in her fabulous Dayglow outfit, which, by the way, you can't tell, but she's wearing alien slippers, like high-heeled shoes. They're phenomenal. I want to talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which I see there's lots of Trekkies in the audience. Those are friends of mine. I made that outfit. Sorry. Anyway, there's a myriad of absolutely fabulous looks in this show. There's textures. There's so many just minuscule design elements that are fabulous. And so I wanted to say, were there any interesting design elements you incorporated specifically into the costumes for the ones you built from scratch, and that you could talk about with the audience real quick? Anything unique or anything difficult?
Yeah, most of the costumes are built from scratch. I would say episode 2, the Deleb, we had a new alien that we could design for, and it was a desert-dwelling kind of nomadic race. And I had to look at the environment where they were living. It was very arid, very harsh. And so what I like to do is manipulate fabrics. So we used ice dye technique, we used bleach dyeing, and all these different, like rust dyeing, all these different weird techniques. So when the different dyeing techniques are formed, it like kind of makes an alien kind of random quality to the fabric. And we did things like covered the fabric with silicone, which then gives it kind of like this weird skin-like membrane look. So we always love to like add these like weird details, lots of like hand embroidery, machine embroidery. We cover things with with different like goo, and I feel like that just really helps kind of like make it, you know, alien looking and otherworldly. We want to like kind of take out the human hand. We want to like look as if it's from a different world. So yeah, Star Trek is amazing. Every episode we get to do a new alien, like visit a new planet. So it's been a real blast.
That is absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
Now, obviously Star Trek has been on the air for eons. Everyone in this room is familiar with it. You were tasked with taking something that is immediately recognizable and familiar and redesigning it to be a little bit new and a little bit different. Can you talk about that process a little bit?
Yeah, what's great, Star Trek's been around for 56 years. I've got all this content to like look at and be inspired by. So I am so grateful for this opportunity to contribute to canon. It's just an amazing kind of like, moment for me and the team. We look at it as we're reimagining these characters, especially legacy characters or legacy aliens. So we look at what they did back in the 60s and we just use our kind of current technologies, techniques, materials, even the skill set of our crew has changed. So we just infuse our kind of these elements and kind of elevate it to a new, the modern world. So the audiences have changed as well. Like they expect detail, and so we can't get away with some of the costumes that were kind of shown in the 60s. We've got to like, we've got Meghan to compete with here. We've got to like lift our game. So yeah, we've got to infuse a lot of detail for sure.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
The competition is steep on this panel.
Oh yeah,
folks.
cutthroat.
All right, so Carleigh, with your experience working on projects like the series and the upcoming film Teen Wolf and American Horror Story 1984, how do you approach these knowing the fans of the series are passionate cosplayers?
So I actually started getting into cosplay and stuff like that after I started doing shows. So what got me interested in cosplay was after one of the first movies I ever did. I went and I saw like how people recreated the characters and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. These guys are doing the characters better than I am. So when I started kind of like paying attention to cosplay and seeing how people did the characters, I started thinking of things like for 1984, like a lot of people like to cosplay like Billy and stuff like that. And so I was like, it's 1980s, what's something that'll make it pop and you'll know it's her? So I put like a bright blue eyeshadow on her. So that was something that was like with a hit, with her wardrobe, with her hair, with the bright blue eyeshadow, bam, you got it. So it's just knowing little things like that, like knowing where little blood hits are and little things that people can like play off of and have like marks to kind of make make their character off of. Because you don't also, with makeup, like with what I do, I always want to complement the costumes and complement the hair and not take away from that, but just give it like an extra little oomph to it. So that's a big thing with makeup, I think, is not overwhelming and taking away from other places and just kind of being in that. I might have kind of jumped around that conversation.
No,
sorry.
I think the answer's in there. A second question for you. For 1984, technically being a period piece, what was your research process like for the season in order to make it accurate to the decade?
Oh, research. So when I start, Barry probably knows too, period pieces are a whole nother animal. Whenever I start with like pop culture of the time. So we were specifically in 1984, which like if you go to periods, like the early 80s is much different than later 80s, so you have to be like really in that. I do a lot of pop culture, I watch a lot of movies. Like 1984 was specifically like a slasher, so I did like, I remember Sleepaway Camp was one of like the biggest movies I watched, and movies like that, and I just, pop culture, movies, looking at things of the time. Like for me, I would look at a lot of like old makeup manuals and makeup books. I'd look at a lot of like makeup campaigns from the day and stuff like that, and that's where I start pulling. And then from there, obviously, you go into like your characters and your specifics, but that kind of just gets you grounded in that world a little bit. So I just start with one thing and I just kind of go out. If that makes any sense, I don't know.
So Barry, Pam and Tommy has been extraordinarily, very widely applauded for the transformation of Lily James into Pamela Anderson, for which you received an Emmy nomination, if you guys weren't aware. Can you touch on what the overall process was like, especially with the use of wigs and makeup to create these essentially very iconic looks out of, basically from nothing?
Yeah, it was wild. When we found out that Lily and Sebastian were cast, it was kind of mind-blowing, because you think there's these two beautiful movie stars who have never been associated with a look that was quite like this. How are we going to change them into these people? And both of them were 100% on board with transforming, but they both wanted to color their own hair. They wanted to really dive in. Thankfully, I was able to talk Lily out of coloring her hair, and we used wigs instead of it. So custom wigs were built. I had 4 total that were built for her head specifically. They're all lace front European hair that I swatched all of these drugstore colors, because Pam notoriously colored her own hair over the years. It was just easier, faster, cheaper. So I went through all these drugstore colors and just kind of looked at blondes from the time, and then swatched those with virgin European hair that I was going to use to build the wigs, because I wanted to make sure they were going to last through the whole production, because there was going to be a huge amount of heat styling and the elements of us being on the beach constantly and her in the water and all of those things. So I wanted to make sure they were going to stand up, so we didn't color the hair. I wanted to make sure we used virgin, and it ended up working out well. We shaded the roots, and because we had so many wigs, I was able to prep a multitude of looks ahead of time and really make sure that we had options for each day, because we shot in a crazy sort of renegade style where the director, Craig, would just have racks and racks of costumes on set, and we would have all of our looks standing by, because we never know which direction he was going to go that day. We had scenes that were planned, but he might want to jump somewhere else completely, and we had to be ready. So it was great to have those options. And Sebastian, we colored his own hair, which ended up working out great. We straightened it with a chemical treatment, and then just colored it in the trailer once every 2 weeks, and gave him an amazing cut that was just like Tommy Lee's, and I think it worked out really well.
Well, Barry, we can't talk to you without mentioning the iconic and groundbreaking series Pose, which needs a much bigger reaction than that. Thank you, for which you did win an Emmy last year, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So what direction did you want the characters to go in throughout the 3 seasons of the series, and how did you reflect their journey within their hairdos?
I mean, we were dealing with a specific group of people at a specific time in culture in New York City, specifically the ballroom culture, and as a white man who is not part of that culture, it was important to me to have a team that represented the culture that we were working with. So we had an amazing team of people that came from the ballroom community, but also just from the Black community in general. So I was the only white person on my team intentionally, because A, I love to create opportunity and open doors for people whenever possible, but B, we had to make sure that it was authentic and that it was accurate to the time in culture in New York history with the gay community, the trans community, the AIDS epidemic, and all of those things. So we start out with a group of actors who are extremely poor, on the outskirts, trying to find themselves, find their way in society, in their own lives. And by the end of season 3, we're kind of in the same place, but they figured some things out. So their hair had to speak not only to their culture, their experience, but also to the times that we were living in New York. So I had to really dive into research for that to make sure that we were portraying this community accurately and really sort of lifting up all of these amazing ball moments, because much like coming to a cosplay convention and cosplaying, when you go to a ball in New York City, the ballroom culture, that was their moment to kind of cosplay their dreams and to bring those to life. So they would spend, steal, borrow, whatever it took to create these looks and compete in these balls, because that was where they were safe, were welcomed, and could express themselves and the life that they wanted to live. So you would kind of dress and prepare yourself for these categories like executive realness, like I'm going to be a rich executive businesswoman. And meanwhile, you're going home to your, studio apartment at night, but for that moment, you're able to live out your dreams and pretend that there aren't all of these biases that exist in the world that are limiting you from succeeding as a person and sometimes just even keeping you from lifting your head up off the pillow in the morning. So we really had to dive into that world and make sure we celebrated the beauty of the community as well as the hardships that they had throughout.
That is fabulous.
I know, I was like, I'm gonna applaud
Yeah. I'm like misty. That was wonderful. That was beautiful.
Okay, so this question is for everyone, but we're gonna start with Meghan and move our way that way. Obviously, you each have such a large part in designing characters. What are some of the key elements you try to incorporate into any work you do to communicate a character's personality? And is there anything specific you all do when starting the design process?
I do a tremendous amount of research. So even though Moon Knight is more of a fantasy and it's a comic, it was where did Stephen come from? What does he do? Where does he live? What books does he read? What bus does he take? What train does he take? The tube. What tube does he take? And, all of that. What is he eating? How come his only friend is the guy that he sits next to in the gold suit? What are those reasons? So I do, yes, Crowley, excuse me. So I look into that. In Moon Knight, I had to do a lot of research on the Egyptian culture. I went to public school. I didn't know a lot about Egyptian culture. So that was, we had an Egyptian director named Mohammed Diab. So that was very important of getting that correct. Sure. Because he wanted to show Egypt portrayed of how Egyptians really are instead of how they are depicted in movies from the past and maybe a negative light. So that was a tremendous amount of research and kind of talking through with the team. By the time Oscar and I met, it was now finding the characters. So we found Stephen first because Stephen, that's who we started with in the show, and that's who Oscar kind of found on his own, and we figured that out together. And as soon as we started putting the costume on, I cropped the pants, I gave him a heavier shoe, I gave him some vintage shirts, and as soon as Oscar put that together and put that on in the fitting, his posture changed. And he just kept when you put an actor in something or you do their hair and you do their makeup, all of a sudden you can see that moment of the transition. And so that changed, and I said, okay, we have it here, and then we moved on to Mark. And with Mark, men that are action stars always wear like a leather jacket and a t-shirt, and I was very much like, we're not wearing a leather jacket and a t-shirt. The first fitting I did was mainly Stephen, and I had 3 looks for Mark, but I had the look that's in the desert with the long kind of white coat and the kind of cream pants. And as soon as he put that on with the vest, it was like, we didn't really try anything else on. Like, I knew that was the basis of the character, and I knew the moment he put it on, it was gonna be the poster. Like, I knew that was gonna be the poster. Like, you just, you know, you have it. But incorporating other things, I like to incorporate a lot of details that maybe only the actor knows, maybe only it is like reference to the comic, an Easter egg, or the director or someone. I like to pepper those things in. So when at the end of the show, we did at the very end, when Jake Lockley comes to screen, he's in the front. I knew he would be in the front of the limo, and I didn't just want to do what he wears. He wears a leather jacket from the comic, and I didn't want to do a leather jacket. So I custom made. I mean, most of the clothes are all custom made in the show, but it was actually a denim, like a raw denim, and on the collar, when he pops the collar up on the back of the collar, I wanted to take symbols from Egyptian culture, but also Oscar's Guatemalan. And his brother is in the show. He was his like scene partner with him. So I took the first issue of Moon Knight, when Moon Knight first came into the MCU. I took Oscar's birthday, his brother's birthday, and there was like one other date, and I combined that in Mayan symbol, an Egyptian symbol, and then we 3D printed it onto like a collage onto the back, and there's a Khonshu symbol in the back of the collar. So if you go back and look, it's popped up. No one would know that until I
That's
just told
incredible.
you. But Oscar really appreciated it, and so I gave Oscar and his brother, like, on the fabric, like a framed thing of it at the end, and Oscar was like super appreciative.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Can we applaud? I think we applaud.
But those small things that only maybe he would know is I like to do that on all of the characters.
The biggest thing for me, no matter what project I work on, whether it's a period piece, we're creating real people, or if it's creating new characters, is just to make sure these characters are authentic, that they feel like real people, that we are not pulled out of the story by their look, their appearance, and I also like to make sure that the actor is part of that conversation, because ultimately they're the ones that are bringing our work to life. So if our work is not cohesive with their vision of who this character is, then it's never going to be successful. So these conversations are kind of how we start the baseline of the design process. You know, we obviously look at the script and we talk to the directors and the showrunners and all of these people that have input, but those people aside, the only conversation that really matters to me is my conversation with my actor. And then together, I believe that the look we come up with is going to be the look that the show wants, 9 times out of 10. It's rare that what we create together is not what the director or the producers want. Sometimes it is, but you have to be willing to take those risks. But authentic, you know, natural, beautiful characters is what I always strive for, and that's driven from conversations with my actors.
Bernadette?
Okay, so I guess on a show like Star Trek, you have all of this content to like glean through. I would say I start with the script. I get as much information as possible from any kind of detail that's mentioned. I then put together mood boards. So if it's a new character or if it's a legacy character, I kind of, put these like mood boards together, add textures and color palettes, and just present that to the producers and the directors and just see if I'm on the right track. I then kind of design on a spectrum, because we are often doing these legacy aliens. I have to kind of show the producers and directors, this is what a Romulan would look like if I did a very TOS version, or this is what a Romulan would look like if it was really quite different from that. So I offer up these options, and it's the producers who essentially decide what they want to see, and we go from there. So often they choose something in the middle. That's what I've tended to notice on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And then, I would say, like, talking with the actors, making sure they're comfortable with a character. Often we're the first point of call, like costume, hair, makeup. It's just we're kind of creating this character it's a collaboration. So I would definitely say the actors are very much involved. Yeah, I would say that's my answer.
And
That's a good answer.
And I think sometimes through those conversations with the actors, we come up with things that the director and producers may not even have ever
Yeah.
dreamed of. Like, they didn't actually know that they wanted that until you show them. So
Yeah.
that's why I think when I say I kind of have those conversations privately and do my own thing, it's not that I'm disregarding what they want. It's
Right.
just that sometimes we have ideas that maybe they didn't have in their head
Yeah,
until
and
we show them.
Yeah, you have to develop that personal relationship with the actor so they trust you. You have to gain that trust so they can go all in on a character.
For
And I
sure.
would say illustrators are a really important key position in a costume department. They help you envisage your character. You might have a mood board or a really quick sketch, some design ideas, and they bring to life a character in a matter of days. And the skill set that illustrators have in costume is incredible, and I applaud them. They make my life really, really easy because it's like they draw from my mind exactly what I want, and it's a really great collaboration as well. So illustrators, I would say, is a key element.
I work all around, so I do prosthetics, character, beauty. So like the way I start with a character always depends on what's needed, just flat with that. But going into a character, I read the script, you get an idea. The biggest thing for me with makeup and everything is the first time you see them is the first impression you get, and you gotta kind of give it right. You gotta give the audience an idea of who they are and what they're trying to portray, or either one of those. So again, working with actors is a huge thing of what we do, because it's very much the safe space and where you start creating and become that character to go out and continue growing from there. A lot of what I do is I ask people how they want to feel or how they feel in their character, other than, the obvious of like breaking down the script, seeing like, would this character wear makeup? What does makeup mean to them? If they're a creature, like what do they do? Do they split out blood? Do they start protruding from the skull? Like what's going on? But as far as just like a basic makeup, how do you want to feel? Is it someone who's a little like grunge down and a little like down on his luck? And so maybe you like bring his eyes down, you like sunken in his cheeks, and from far away you're kind of like, all right, there's something going on there. But it is very, what we all do, it's very specific to what the character is. And so that's kind of how I start. And then obviously, you have your idea, your actor has your idea, and then you see the costumes, and that pumps stuff up. You see hair, and that pumps it up, and then you get on set and see how the actors, so like all of that, mine usually starts with the idea, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing until you finally get the product. Because I love how everybody comes together and like makes something happen. But as far as designing and quick stuff, you see somebody and in a second you can kind of tell like how they are. So if they bumped up their lashes, if they're bleeding out, if they're sunken in, I do a lot of like blood gags, so I'm always like, bleed them out. So hopefully that answers the question.
It did. I think,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
So for all of you, if you could give one glorious tip for cosplayers out there who are looking to recreate something you created, what would that tip be? And I want to start with Bernadette, because you're the shepherd of the oldest fandom in all of Christendom.
No pressure.
No pressure. I mean, I think it goes without saying, know your character, do your research, look at the poses, maybe the facial expressions, maybe the characteristics, any key dialogue. But for me, visually, what I love is when people go to the extra detail, like Giraffe is in the audience. She's done Queen Nev from our fantasy episode, and I'm just blown away with every detail that she's done, and I can tell she's put so much work into it. Take a bow, Giraffe, so good. I think any design element that you glean from watching an episode or the film is just like, go that extra mile, because it's always noticed, it's always remembered. And aging and breakdown is a really key point, I would say, element to making a costume look grounded. So ombre, dye, that hem, like get in those seams and get your dye and your paints and make things look a little bit rough around the edges. Like don't be shy about making things look grungy and real and broken down. Yeah.
Carleigh, you're next.
Oh, I'm next? Oh, gosh. I think I kind of hit on it earlier, but as far as makeup goes, like a lot of the stuff we're talking about is really costume based, so like a lot of the makeup is a little more minimal depending. But I've seen people recreate like some of like the ghosts and stuff I've done, and when I always tell people like something that's more prosthetic or bloody or something like that, you kind of look at it and see what stands out to you. So if like you look at a creature or something and their eyes stand out to you and like their blood in certain spots, you kind of copy that and follow that. That's always what I do when I'm like recreating my own makeups. If I have to do them multiple times in a row and stuff, I hit like certain points and I'm like, oh, there's blood on this point by this and this and this, and that's kind of where I start building and creating that character, and it comes a little bit.
Megan, there's at least 6 Moon Knights in the audience. So if you had a tip to give them, what would it be?
Start simple. Moon Knight was 803 pieces when it was all said and done. So it's not the first time I did a series called Watchmen. So I would say that was kind of a great, and I've done a few other things as an assistant. So that was a great learning lesson of like the simple silhouette. And I would start with muslin, like make the costume in muslin, because costumes and cosplaying is expensive and everyone is putting so much into it. So if you're sewing it yourself, do it in some scrap fabric or a muslin or whatever you can do to kind of work out those kinks, because when you start molding that mask, that gets expensive. So I would work out those details. Like Bernadette said, the color and the breakdown, and kind of, I love aging and dyeing of costumes, and now I just want to 3D print fabrics and dye fabrics and all of that kind of stuff. So I would start as simple as possible, and your bathtub is an amazing element with some RIT dye. So
It is.
I've had many a job where you don't have the facilities and you just dye in the bathtub. So
Fabric dye in the back.
fabric dye, fabric dye.
Joke there, what is
Yes,
it? Sorry.
I did dye a fabric dye, but it was a
Indeed.
red item, and so when we were filming on location, and that was looking like a mess by the time we were done with it. So, yeah, I would just have fun with it. I think the most important thing about cosplaying and creating is to have a good time, which I hope all of you are having, coming and seeing, and coming here.
All right, Barry, take us home.
It is amazing, I mean, to see what everyone does. I think the only advice I can give, because I do wigs, is if you're going to wear your hair up and you're wearing a wig, try to leave some of your hair out in the back and spray it the color of the wig, or color your hair to match it if you're really invested. That's how I did all of like Pam's updos. Even though her wigs were custom, we colored the back of Lily's hair and bleached it to a high level blonde, so that whenever I put her hair up, I could cover all the edges of the wig foundation. Because even with you can do a custom nape lace where you have a hairline ventilated on the back of a wig, but it's very difficult to have that on someone's neck for the entire day, because it's glued down and you're constantly refreshing and reapplying, and it doesn't move as naturally as the hair that grows out of your head. So anytime you can utilize some of your own hair to help blend your wig, it always is more successful and it looks like it's growing out of your head.
You guys, this next question is tough, and I apologize in advance. We're going to start with Carleigh.
Oh,
It's not. I'm being dramatic. I'm being a little bit dramatic. I feel like this is asking you like to pick your favorite child.
Oh no, oh
But
yeah, this one.
The question, it is. I feel this, and I'm not even one of you guys. What is your favorite character that you have had a hand in designing?
And if you have to think about it, we can talk about ourselves.
We can tap dance. We can put on a little show here.
I mean, let me throw it totally different.
Okay.
I have a lot of favorite characters, but something like the favorite thing that I've been starting to create on the side, and what I really look up to what all you guys do, is there's this thing called Monsterpalooza, and a lot of makeup artists go and do makeups and all this stuff. And for me, I've sometimes been the most proud of those makeups, because I'm always trying to like push myself as an artist and do something. Like one year, I made wings. I have no idea how to do wings. I paint faces. I made all the clothes. I have no idea how to do that. And I watched videos of what you guys do, and it pushed me. And so for me, like taking away from like the TV and film, stuff like Monsterpalooza and side gigs and stuff like that, I'm really proud of, because it just pushed me in all the elements in all the ways. You know, it was like when you're working, obviously we get to be creative, but we also get in boxes sometimes with like the directors, the producers, what actors want opposed to what we thought we wanted. And it's just something really cool. Like I said, I made wings one time, and I wanted to make it so that they didn't go over the shoulders, so I made like a strapping mechanism down here and like taped them in. I was like, this is rad, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have done. Or like right now I'm trying to figure out how to like have someone with like a cut open chest and then have her bleed out and walk around a convention center without tubing and stuff. So if I were, I could go into different shows and be like, this is my favorite one here, but I just like doing that, and that's something I'm working right now, and I'm really proud on stuff like doing that. You know, having a hand in everything. So is that...
When the bleeding out at the convention happens, please let me know.
I will. I'll send you.
Okay, let's work our way down this way, and have you your favorite character.
I love anytime I get the chance to do a legacy character or reimagined alien that's been seen in the original series of Star Trek. I love that. But I think for me, the episode 8 fantasy characters were by far my favorite episode. It was just like, I loved The Labyrinth and The Princess Bride growing up. They were my favorite films. And I feel like it was my inner child just bursting out. I just like, it was a dream come true, and it doesn't happen all the time where you can really, bring your inner child's fantasies to life. So doing those costumes were amazing. I loved the research involved, and Benga was played by Babs Lusamokan, and he has Nigerian heritage. I could, research past and present Nigerian kings and really give a lot of detail to that character in particular, which is something I don't take lightly. It's so important, especially if it's not a culture of your own. So I find that these moments where I can do the research and go to the detail is just incredible. So yeah, fantasy was my favorite for sure.
Love it. Barry, how about you?
For me, it was Mother Electra, Dominique Jackson. I always called her my life-size Barbie, because I always wanted one as a kid. And I'm 6'4", and Dominique in heels is also 6'4". So you can see pictures of us from set, and I have to get to her wigs, which were often sometimes 2 feet tall, I had to reach up. So thank God I was tall, but getting to create these sort of dynasty looks from the 80s on her that kind of surpassed all time periods, and just get to do the ultimate, most glamorous looks on her was just my little childhood dream come true, because that's who I wanted to be as a kid, was just Joan Collins, basically.
Just shoulders.
Shoulders and hair and makeup, yes.
Megan, how about you?
Well, I know everyone's going to want another Moonette character in that, so we'll start there, but I also have a surprise. I just love so much about Moon Knight in general. I love doing that show. Obviously, Moon Knight, Mr. Knight. I was terrified of Mr. Knight when I first started, and then I was like, oh my gosh, this looks amazing. But on that show, Towerette had a little place in my heart, because we had every person in my department worked on that costume. I had an in-house leather maker. I had an in-house metalsmith. We were hammering the hieroglyphs in. We were my metalsmith was hand hammering the hieroglyphs onto the headpiece that was in the headpiece here. It was Towerette means birth or mother, and there was a birthing dance from a tomb that was pounded into that, and then I had a person hand paint a whole bunch of stuff. So that part was really special. And then each one of those strips of fabric were individually cut and sewn, and the leather, the corset underneath, and so it was very hands-on for everyone. But the character that I love so much is Lady True from Watchmen. So she that was a Hong Choi and I, a pure collaboration vision. We did that together. I pitched the white and green, and she only wore white and green the entire series. So it was really her and I together, creating that. So it was very special.
That is fabulous.
Just casually creating our lives.
Thank you. If it wasn't for you, we'd get no work. Okay, and I'm going to read this word for word because I don't want to get it wrong. In one sentence or less, what piece of advice would you like to give creatives in the audience who are interested in cosplaying or possibly in entering the entertainment industry? And we want to start with Barry for this one.
I would just say dream big. Nothing is out of reach for you. I mean, 5 years ago, I come from the theater, and 5 years ago I was working on Broadway doing someone else's work 8 times a week. And 5 years later now, I've had the great experience of doing all of these amazing shows and creating these characters. And they're things that I only dreamed of as a kid. I didn't know that it would happen in my lifetime, that I'd get to be a part of this. So I would just say, do what you're doing, and don't shy away from any opportunity because it seems too big for you, because it's not.
That's for all of you. You almost answered.
Yeah, so I'm
All of you must
Okay.
answer.
I would say just don't give up, keep going. Even if there's moments of setback, you're going to get better at it. Every time you do a cosplay, every time you try and create that character from scratch, you're going to learn something. So just keep doing it and go to that extra mile. The detail will always be noticed.
I think, honestly, just go for it. Like how I've done my career, like I got a lot of really awesome things that I started working on very young, and I had no idea what I was getting in for, and I would just balls to the wall, just go for it. Like if I wanted to start learning blood tubing, I would just start putting tubes together and spraying blood everywhere. I know I can't talk about blood. I can't stop talking about blood, I'm sorry. All I want to talk about is blood. But, it really is like, you just got to go for it. Like what they said is like, don't be afraid of something. Like you always are going to make a mistake, and I know it's like, but you are going to learn from it. Like you don't do something right the next time, you figure out how you want to do it the next time. You're approached with a project that you have no idea, you've never worked on something like that. Start researching, start pulling things together, like start putting clothes together, start throwing makeup on your face, and just seriously go for it. And sometimes don't think so much about it. Just start it and see what happens.
Megan, you're next.
What everyone said.
Fabulous.
What I did when I was an assistant for a long time, and I assisted Michael Wilkinson, who does all of like Zack Snyder's films. And before assisting him, I was like, I'm choosing to not assist someone that I'm not gonna learn something from. So in everything that I do, I always want to be learning something. And if you're not doing that, then what's the point? Because we need to educate ourselves. So once I started working with Michael, I learned about so many techniques that I didn't know from other designers that I was working with. And it really helped me in my career decide where I was going and where I wanted to head and what direction to do that in.
Wow.
So keep learning.
Keep learning. You guys, I for one cannot wait for my next cosplay. Thank you to our panelists, Megan, Barry, Bernadette, and Carleigh. Give us a round of applause. Thank you for giving us insight into characters you've designed and tips we can take home with us for our next cosplays.
And thank you to Impact 24 PR, Cosplay Universe, and Comic-Con for putting on the panel. You can also get more information on Cosplay Universe, like where to watch and more, by visiting cosplayuniversemovie.com. And if you want to keep up with these lovely panelists, they're all on Instagram, I know, because I followed them recently.
And thank you for all of you guys for joining us, and have a great and safe weekend.